Hello, and welcome to our first edition of Inside Plan Fort Collins. This is a quarterly program to give you an update on what's going on with a large community visioning exercise called Plan Fort Collins. I'd like to welcome all of our guests today. We're happy to have City Manager Darren Atterbury with us. Darren, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Kelly.
Leslie Ellis is with Clarion Associates, one of our consultants. Leslie, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We're pleased to have Mayor Doug Hutchinson joining us. Mayor, thanks for being here.
I'm delighted to be here.
And Joe Frank, who is our Director of Advanced Planning and the Project Manager for the Plan Fort Collins effort. Joe, welcome.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, this is a community-wide process, and it's going to have big implications for our community. Mayor, I'd like you to start by just kicking us off with why it is so important to the community.
Well, Fort Collins is a great community, and what we're going to be talking about today touches on two of the reasons that we are a great community, and that is we do planning. We're an award-winning planning city, and this is about planning, and we involve the people in the community in that planning. And this effort, the Plan Fort Collins, is really to get, as a community, to look forward. What is our vision? What should Fort Collins be like in the future? This whole kind of process in this broad, high level that Plan Fort Collins represents started in 1997 with the first ever city plan, which is that overarching plan that sets the stage for what the city of Fort Collins should be. We updated it about 6 years ago. Since then, there's so many things that have happened to change it. This truly is, I think, the most important, except for perhaps that first time we did it, the most important thing that we're going to do in planning, because we have changes in things like we are doing infill and redevelopment now. The size of our city is fixed. That changes what we look at in the plan. We're doing things like the Mason Corridor, which is a major change. So there's a lot of things to consider and do. This is very important. It affects everybody in Fort Collins. I'd like to give a little pitch for get involved. We are bending over backwards to have a wide range of possibilities for everyone to get involved. This plan will be most successful if we truly have that total cross-section of the community, your ideas, your thoughts. We've got a good structure to pull that together. Please do get engaged.
Yeah, great, thank you. Darren, share with us a little bit how we go from this kind of community, because it really is a community vision, how that affects the city as an organization then, and why this is so important for us as an organization.
Well, let me begin by saying I couldn't agree more with what the mayor just said. I think it was a great summary of what we're hopeful for and what we expect ultimately to deliver as well. And if anyone thinks that this is prescribed and it's already a done deal, you're wrong. This is a dialogue, it's a community dialogue, it's a visioning process, but also how it impacts our organization is it really will, and with our utility services so engaged, and Joe, I suspect you'll talk about that as we go through this show, but really this is a blueprint for the next 20, 25 years. Some would like us to be thinking out 50 and 100 years. It will have a major impact on this city organization also on how we deliver services, whether that's focused in centers or along corridors. We have to be very intentional about the physical growth as well so that we can efficiently provide services. So this is something that the city organization, we have a great team. Joe's project lead, he's got a great track record. We've got a great group of consultants, and we've got a staff team and a community who has shown time and time again that they engage because they love this community. So I'm looking forward to the next year big time. And as a planner, what an exciting opportunity. I mean, as I've said in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, we don't get a lot of these in our career. This is a very, very unique opportunity. And I think Fort Collins, as the mayor said, with such a great planning history, what a privilege it is to do this kind of work, and also an incredible responsibility.
So with that lead in and that responsibility, Joe, talk a little bit about what the effort entails, and as we talk about all of the pieces of the community that this touches, what are the aspects that we're really looking at through this effort?
Well, this planning effort, we're going to be addressing some of the traditional planning topics like transportation and multimodal, the environment, open space lands and parks and recreation, and the built environment and land use and how those all work together. I think some of what Darren was talking about, some of the unique parts of this is the partnership we have with the utilities on this one, and they're looking toward the future, what they're going to look like in the 21st century, and sustainability and energy conservation and energy use and water use. And I think one of the very unique parts of this plan, that I believe probably unique across the country, is the involvement in the utilities in this project. They're truly partners in this. And there's other issues that we're dealing with that are sort of non-traditional, health and wellness, how that's going to impact the community in the future, and food production and access to health facilities will be part of this. Arts, the culture, and the economy is another part that is pretty unique and new, and how do we integrate the arts and culture into the community? What are the opportunities for that sector and its contributions to the economy? Lots of new issues. I think the plan will build upon a lot of good work that's been done, a lot of good planning over the last 20 years. But we're in a new world from what we were in 1997. A new economy. This plan is going to be dealing with the first time that we're expecting to reach build out on our vacant land during this process, and that has implications for our community, our economy, our neighborhoods, and so it's a real challenge this time around.
So how far out are we looking? I mean, when we talk about a Plan Fort Collins initiative, is that 5 years from now, or is that 50 years from now?
Yeah.
Yes and yes?
I thought I answered that earlier.
Yeah. We're looking 50 years, we're looking 100 years, looking at the trends that'll affect our community. And then we're going to be backing up and saying, well, okay, what do we need to do over the next 25 years in response to those different kinds of trends? And there's all kinds of trends that are happening, and we may not see them 10 years or 20 years, but we need to see them 50 years. The plan will also provide guidance for day-to-day decisions. And for the next, next budget round or the next capital improvement program round of funding. So it is a 1 year, 5 year, 25 year, and with a 50-year look down the road.
So Leslie, I'm going to turn to you and ask, so how do we do that, right? That seems like a pretty big undertaking. How do you do that?
Well, we start by asking questions about what's important for the short term and what's important for the long term. And that's part of the dialogue that's happening right now with the community, is really understanding where the city is now in terms of accomplishments and programs that are happening, really understanding what needs to be accomplished in the next several years, as Joe mentioned, through the capital improvements plan. Part of the discussion that's going on is the resourcing the future, and there's a lot of overlap with how projects are funded, how city services are funded. So a lot of those items are short term. Long term, a plan such as this really sets the stage for big decisions about transportation projects and improvements, land use patterns into the future, looking at targeted redevelopment locations in the community. So all of those items are really on the table for discussion as we work our way through this effort with the community, and looking at exactly what parts of the community might change in the future and how they might change to accommodate needs for demographic shifts, for example, an aging population, what kind of housing might be necessary as we look 30 years into the future, what kinds of parks, neighborhoods, businesses, and so forth, jobs, how are those kinds of trends affecting the community and changing it over time. And then likewise, what neighborhoods are more stable and less likely to change, and where people have interest in making sure that, that they are essentially maintained the way they, are comfortable with them today. So, all of those items are part of a comprehensive plan. By its nature, it's very broad and touches on all of these topics. But really, the decisions that the city makes today and the community makes today really affect how it shapes over the future, over 30, 40, 50 years.
All right. So we've talked, both of you have touched a little bit on the topics and really the broad nature of it. There are some specific areas, kind of 8 specific categories that we're looking at in the plan. Joe or Leslie, can one of you maybe just review those for us?
You're going to test our memories now.
I am.
I don't rely on memory for anything. I've got my my cheat sheet. Do you want me to rattle through them?
That'd be great.
Very quickly. So we've started to explore through a current document, and I'll just hold this up so everybody can see it. It's available online on the city's website on fcgov.com and then /Plan Fort Collins. So this is a current a piece of information that's on there. There will be new information as we work our way through the process. But part of what this report has done is explore and really understand what accomplishments have been made in the community and what some of the forward-looking challenges and opportunities are. And then the topics that you mentioned, Kelly, are arts and culture, built environment and land use, environment and utilities, finance and economy, health, wellness and safety, housing, natural areas, parks, recreation, open space, transportation, and then a sort of an umbrella of sustainability topics, a lot of the topics that integrate across those different 8 subject areas. And so we've started this process earlier in this year about really assessing how the city's doing with regard to those topic areas, and then have been having the conversation with the community through March and April about, you know, have we missed anything? Are there any other topics or ideas that should be on the table related to those areas?
Okay, great, thank you. So, Mayor, you know, our elected officials are certainly also going to be involved in this process along with our large city staff team. Again, can you share with us just a little bit about, from your perspective, how this influences decision making for you and ongoing efforts that the city will undertake throughout the year?
It's a great question, and the council is already making some suggestions on how this process can be tied pretty directly to our budgeting process. Everything starts with the plan. That's the scheme to get somewhere. And this is the scheme to get somewhere in terms of what's Fort Collins going to be like in the future. What is the vision? I like the idea and the balance of looking at trends and some of those 50, 100-year things. Practical planning can't plan too well for something 50 years in the future, but if you have that in mind as you're doing those 25-year in the future decisions, it makes for a very good planning process. I'm really pleased with the way we've structured. It's a good planning process when you have it in chunks that get focused on, the same as our budgeting for outcomes is focused on 7 outcomes. That is a good way to have a good focus that then gets brought together. That absolutely is a context, an umbrella, a driver for a lot of decisions that elected officials are going to have to make. Perhaps most notably is the budget. And again, we're doing some good things here to make sure that this plan, where we want to go, the budget which says how we are going to implement getting there is really related. So I think it's a great process, and I'm delighted to see the way it's been structured, the outreach, and how we are relating it to do exactly, perform exactly that function of helping us with some of those hard decisions.
On any given Tuesday night, if there's a future land use issue, the council inevitably will be dealing with, once we're through the adoption process of this plan, Plan Fort Collins. But so if you fast forward out 1.5 years or 2 years or 5 years, this plan really sets in place a lot of different things which the council will ultimately rely on in making its decisions. So we have sort of at the very high level a vision, and then an actual plan, and then regulations that basically implement that plan. Things as specific as zoning codes, zoning designations on a particular piece of property, or maybe land use regulations that influence how that property develops. So at a much more practical level, again, fast forward out 2 years from now, that council will be using these documents to help make decisions on specific land use kinds of development projects, excuse me, and things like that. So it's for those people in our community who want to talk about specifics, that's coming. For those people who are big fans of vision and planning work, we're in the middle of that right now. So it's not a sort of an esoteric, lengthy conversation about what should we be 100 years from now. It will very, very directly translate into how the physical development, and in some cases, programmatic development of this community will occur.
One of the questions that we're hearing, and particularly in this economy, is how would you pay for all this? Resourcing the Future is dealing with that issue. Plan Fort Collins is also going to be looking at long-term financial sustainability, and we're going to be building some sophisticated models just for this effort that will look at different scenarios and different choices and analyze, well, what is this growth going to pay for, and what's the city's share of it, and what's the sustainable funding sources over the long term. So that's that's another important issue right now, I know, to a lot of people about thinking about the future and about Fort Collins.
Darren, I think that's really helpful for people to understand how it goes from this kind of broad vision down to more practical level, if you will. We've talked and referenced a few different times city plan. We're also, as part of the Plan Fort Collins process, updating our transportation master plan. And so again, as we look at some of those specifics, Leslie, maybe could you talk just a little bit about how we do work our way through that, what the timing is that people can expect if they're anxious to get from the broad level to now I want to talk about maybe the pedestrian plan as part of the transportation master plan. What's that look like?
Okay. Well, we have basically a three-phased process that started earlier in the year, is working its way through phase 1 that will end at about the end of April, and then we start into phase 2 in May and June. And what phase 1 is essentially this process of really understanding, what the issues are. It's the broad visioning, as Darren's saying, talking about big ideas and how to move forward. Now, as we get into phase 2 in May and then through the summer months, that's when we're really looking at choices for the future, very specific, very tangible directions that the city might go in related to land use, related to other policies that affect health and well-being, arts and culture, economic development, the whole gamut of services and topics that are related in the plan. I think that's when the conversation gets more exciting for some people, when you really roll up your sleeves and start talking about choices and ideas for the future. And then as we get into the fall, into the third phase of the effort, then we're looking at implementation strategies. And that's, as Joe mentioned, how do we pay for it, what are the priorities, what are some of the ordinance amendments that might be necessary as a result of the directions that the plan is going in. So that becomes even more tangible, and it's sort of, so this whole process really goes from more broad to very specific. So for the people, as you said, who really want to get in and talk about the meat of something very detailed and specific, I'd say stay tuned, because that's coming very soon.
The plan is to have a draft transportation plan, city plan, master street plan, a draft pedestrian plan at the end of December, and then work its way through the different boards and commissions and the public process in January and February. The implementation that Leslie talks about, we're going to start working that in August, because there's a lot of work, a lot of detail in that. That will start working itself through the process probably about the same time at the December and then January, February. The goal is to have this whole thing done by March of 2011.
And just for people who may not really fully understand the process, there's a lot of internal work going on, there's community input that goes on, but then ultimately this is something that City Council will adopt, right?
So in the past, typically what's driven an effort like this is one large committee that's representative of the community as a whole. And we thought this time, rather than have the one large committee, let's basically build on a lot of the networks that are already in the community. So you've got boards and commissions of the city who are active and cover every topic from transportation to air quality to parks and open, so there's the whole range of topics of boards and commissions. They're highly involved. There also are a series of focus groups that kicked off in March and April and will go on through the effort, and those cover a gamut of topics for just members of the public who are interested in participating, and we would encourage anybody who's interested in those topics to see the list on the website again, or call the Advanced Planning Department. We'll have some more information around the community, also at libraries and other locations, about how to get involved in those focus groups. We'll also have large workshops. We had one in March and another one coming up in June. The date hasn't been set yet, but it'll be in the middle of June, and that's an opportunity for people to come and talk about ideas for the future. And then also, if there are any organizations out there that would like somebody from the city to come and present to them and have a conversation with their organization, you know, Chamber of Commerce, for instance, or if there's an environmental group or homeowners association, anybody who's out there who is interested in hearing more and having a discussion, there are opportunities to have somebody from the city come to them as well. And then the other thing that's a little different in this day and age is all the opportunities for online discussion and website and Facebook and Twitter and online surveys and comment forms and so forth. So there's a lot of information on the website, and people can, if they don't want to spend a lot of time but they are willing to spend a little time, that's a really good way to get involved as well. So those are just a few of the ways that people can get involved, and we're really seeking for as broad-based and representative and inclusive as possible in the community for this effort.
There's also a place I think people can sign up to get ongoing like email notifications when new public involvement opportunities come up. So, you know, I think we've done a good job of providing kind of a high-level understanding of this process. Joe, if someone's out there listening and they think, well, you know, this is kind of intriguing, but I'm still not exactly sure how this affects me.
Right.
Can you give us just a few examples of how previous planning processes have, you know, impacted the city that we live in today?
I guess I just picked out some of the things I was most proud of, and I think we collectively would say we're most proud of, would be, for instance, the vibrant downtown, and emphasizing that being the heart and soul of the community, and then all of the implementation work that has taken place in that area. I think another one that I'm particularly proud of is the visioning that we have done about being sure that we've got enough land for employment, we've got enough land for retail, we have enough planned for housing, that it's in the right place. And I think one of the visible examples that I'm proud of is the Front Range Village development that took place. That just didn't happen. That was done through careful planning. I'm particularly proud in the older core neighborhoods and the stability that has been brought to those neighborhoods. And not only stability, but they're just turning around significantly, and new people, new families moving back. And that just doesn't happen either. That's about having a vibrant downtown contributes to that, but also having parks and schools and public improvements that make those neighborhoods stable. The other thing I think is a change over the last 13, 15 years is the type of new neighborhoods that we're seeing, the choices that you now have that wasn't here 20 years ago about the type of housing that you can live in, or even the lifestyle that you want to live in. And again, that wasn't just, you know, it has to do with the market, of course, is working that way, but it also has to do with planning. And I think one of the things that we were talking about before this presentation started was the sustainability. And that term's been around a long time, been worked on. I think in 1997 was the first time we recognized that sustainability was one of our core values of the community. And oh my gosh, the things that we've done since then, the buildings that the city has built, the response by the private sector in doing LEED certification, and just I think the city organization and community thinking about the triple bottom line and in all of the decisions we make. So that you know, I think that's just an emerging issue, and we're going to take the issue of sustainability in this process to and many of these things that we've done really well to new levels for the next 50 years. I
am able to visit a lot of different cities, and I think about always when I'm in other places what distinguishes Fort Collins from other places. I think that those past planning efforts were very deliberate about quality of life, that we're not going to have dumbed down standards that just create sort of average. Now, we're also going to be very sensitive to the economics of our standards and our processes. So over the last couple of years, as we've talked about economic health kinds of things, the very delicate balance between the built and the natural environment, they're not at the expense of one or the other. They're actually, and Mayor, you've talked about that since the day I met you, you don't have to sacrifice the natural environment for a strong economy or vice versa. But I think about the emphasis on quality of life, and I love that about Fort Collins. And we're going to keep that, and we're going to emphasize that. That's not going to be accidental. It's going to be very deliberate. I think about, in the past, the work that we've done in terms of community separators. Anyone who's been to Orange County, or for that matter, most developing places across the country, you go from one community to another and you have no idea where you are. I think what's great about Fort Collins and our partners to like Loveland and Larimer County and Wellington and others is that we're talking about the separators very deliberately, not in a restrictive way, but to say we want to have some identity between communities. I think that's a huge, very positive element. I mentioned earlier the environment versus the economy. I think we do that well. I think we're always trying to get better, but I think we're doing that very well. So when my kids, just the other day, actually asked about prairie dogs and the role of prairie dogs, well, it's very important to critical habitat. It's part of the ecosystem that we're deliberately trying to maintain through so many different ways. And so can you have a built environment and a natural environment? I think we're doing a pretty good job at that. The other thing, Joe, you've hit on complete streets. But I spent about a week and a half in a community down in Denver metro area traveling back and forth just a couple weeks ago. And corridors, transportation corridors, they're not corridors. They're sea of asphalt with no multi-purpose at all. Very little pedestrian amenity. If so, it's just scarce. No room for bicyclists and no room for human activity. It's simply a sea of asphalt to move cars. And I think that you and your colleagues and past elected officials have done a great job in this community over the last couple of decades to emphasize that these corridors ought to be complete for more than just moving cars. Doesn't mean we shouldn't focus on moving cars, because that's how most of our people move these days. But we have a lot of people using bicycles and walking. And I think that that's a great outcome of past work. And then finally, which I hope that we talk a little bit about here, is the work around best management practices. We are deliberately, consciously trying to learn what other places are doing and bring that back. But I'd love to do that, because what I want to do is let our community know that we are learning from others as well, both mistakes and then great things. So.
Wonderful. That, I think, is a great statement about, again, why this matters to our community as a whole. We are out of time, which I knew would happen, but we're going to do this quarterly, so we can cover that in the next time around. Leslie, any final comments you'd like to make?
Well, I would definitely encourage people, as the mayor said, to get involved in this process, because really what's going to make this a highly successful and really meaningful effort is the community involvement. And there are a number of ways for people to get involved, and we'd really encourage that as much as possible. That we'd love to see, every segment of the community involved in some facet of this effort.
All right, great, thanks. Mayor?
Two things really are exciting to me about this effort. Ping on what Darren just said, with the emphasis on the triple bottom line, the environment, the community, and the economy, I think that we're going to have more treatment about economic health, and that's something we would like to sustain on into the future than we've had in previous plans in an integrated way. And I think that is extremely powerful. And the approach to having a truly broad, across-the-board community involvement, I think, is a real strength of this process. And again, it's up to people to step in. This is a plan about our future. It's a future vision. It sets forth principles and strategies that council will use as a context for decisions. The plan doesn't make those decisions, but it's the context, and we often turn to that. So very important to everybody in Fort Collins. Please do get involved.
Right, thank you for being here. And Joe, with your comments, if you could give a phone number as well. We've mentioned a website, but where people might call your office for more information. 221-6376, and you can talk to a planners. I get goosebumps sitting around talking with this group, because they're so motivated, and I think it shows how important we think the community is. And it's a constant nurturing of community to keep to that quality of life. It's about planning, it's about funding, it's about private sector involvement and public sector involvement, all of us working together. I hope people do come out and participate. Great, thank you. Real brief?
Very quickly, we have had a great history, and can we get better? Absolutely, and I think this is about getting better. Planning is critical. And also, efficient implementation is critical. And Joe, you just said it. Without partnerships, though, we'll be good. But what we're all talking about is great. And so, good sound planning, strong vision, great execution, and strong partnerships. I think we're destined to be great.
That will conclude this first edition of Inside Plan Fort Collins. For more information, please go to fcgov.com/Plan Fort Collins. Thanks for joining us.